All right, man, you are so exactly on time. I literally just hit the go live button and I am now we are about to go live on, there we go. We are now live on Instagram as well. So, hello everyone. Welcome to another Run Wild with Us, Ask Us Anything. I am Lisa Kastner. I'm the founder and CEO of Running Wild and RIZE Presses. And I am here with one of our amazing, amazing editors, Rod Gilly. And we are typically here with a few other of our fantastic editors. And we're here to answer any old questions you have. And we do this on Thursdays between 5 and 6 p.m. Pacific time, 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. And literally, you can ask us whatever you want. All you have to do is go ahead and pop your question into the comments section of whatever social media you are watching this, whether it be LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, now known as X. And we will do our best to answer the questions as honestly and candidly as possible. And again, you just pop your question into the comments section. I'll read it, and then obviously reading it is repeating it, and then we take turns in responding. Ooh, and I see we have Ben. How are you doing?
Good evening.
Woohoo! Good evening.
I found my way.
All right, man. I'm just happy you find your way. So I actually just literally was checking my email before I hit the little go live button and found out that our own Curtis Smith's The Lost and the Blind, which came out last year, is a finalist for a Forward Indie Review Book of the Year 2023. No shock there. We all know how fabulous Curtis is and his editor, Peter Wright. But I just wanted to make sure that we gave those gentlemen the cred they deserve for making it to the finalist list for Forward. So very, very cool. Excellent work, guys. Now, I got a question. I want to say it was like last year. And I don't think I ever asked it in this venue. So I thought, you know what, why don't we open with that and then see if anyone comes in with questions. CJ says, good evening from rainy Pennsylvania. It's nice to see all of you. Fabulous to see you as well, CJ, as always. And honestly, it has been weirdly rainy here in California and the LA area. You'll wake up and it looks like it's been monsoon season. By lunchtime, it's sunny and beautiful. And then it does these like spurts in between. So it's very interesting, actually. But okay. Question. What was the first job you ever had and what caused you to leave it? I'm gonna go with Ben first because he's already giggling, which means this is gonna be a good one.
Yeah. Well, if you don't count planting tobacco, hoeing tobacco, cutting tobacco, stripping tobacco, hanging tobacco, and selling tobacco.
I count that.
Because that wasn't really the first job because I didn't get paid, except I got to eat. It was family farm said, okay, we need help. Come on. And got it. So the first real job where I got a paycheck was in college. It was a work study program where they paid us $1 an hour, and the rest of your wage went towards tuition. So there was lower tuition. Mm-hmm. But my job was to make brooms. And specifically, my job was to go in to be the first one in broom crafts to turn on the vats of hot water. And they told me what colors of corn they needed because it's not straw, it's broom corn. Okay. And I had to dye the corn in the morning, and they would take it out in the afternoon and dry it, and they would use it the next day. But I would come in the next day and start tomorrow's corn.
Wow.
So all my clothes were dyed with broom corn dye. And I left it because I left the school.
All right. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, that was the deal. You had to work. It was something. Let's see, it must have been there's so many hours a week
Mm-hmm.
per semester, and I got my hours in and left early, and they got mad because they didn't have a early morning person to come in and do that for them. But
Wow.
I said, I'm not going to work any more than what I'm supposed to. Where's that money going?
Right. You're only getting $1 an hour, so screw that.
Yeah. That was at Berea, Rod. You probably know Berea College.
Wow. So, Rod, how about you? What was your first job you've ever had, and what caused you to leave it?
Well, I'm kind of the boring one here, but my very first job was between my freshman and sophomore year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Over that summer, I had a job for $1 an hour, swinging a sledgehammer all day, busting rocks on a farmer's piece of land. And so I would bust these stones with a sledgehammer, and then we'd load them up in a wagon, took them down to the creek, and we built a bridge over the creek with these stones. And well, the job ended when the little bridge was done. So that was my first job.
Okay, that's cool. So mine is I need to give you a little bit of backstory so you know why it was so important to me to have this job and why it broke my heart how it ended. So my father, when I was a child, he was a radio personality, and he had been a radio personality for years and years and years, right? Well, he worked the overnight shifts, and one night it was basically just him and the station owner were in the station, and my father was looking at copy, and I'm a little kid, right? I don't know any of this stuff, you know. I'm gonna bet I was maybe like 5 or 6 or something, and it was a station break, and my father's sitting there reading copy, and I don't something in it. He went, "Ah, fuck," and he thought he had the mic off. Now, this is back in the day when they could lose their license for someone cursing on the air. And, you know, my dad just sits there, he's turning pages, and the station owner comes in and just looks like, you know, and like reaches over him, shuts off the mic, and he's like, "Do you know what you did?" And my dad's just like, he looks at the mic, looks at the station owner, and then he's like, "Oh my God." Like, he realized I just said a foul word on the air. And the station owner's like, "You're out." So my dad ended up being blackballed basically for years and years and years. Because again, this is before the time of, you know, all the big New York radio personalities, you know, the guys who cursed as if they never heard a correct term in their lives. And sorry, I'm just double checking. My laptop keeps getting unplugged, so I'm down to like 25%. So I'm like, okay, you better get plugged back in. Okay, anyway, so fast forward. So, you know, most of the jobs that I remember my father having up to a certain point when he was no longer blackballed, but they would at least allow him on the air at like midnight, like the midnight to like 5 a.m. shifts when no one's really listening anyway, unless you're having nookie or smoking pot, right? So, because he was always on big band stations and classical music, you know, so all that kind of stuff. So anyway, so the jobs he had, it was like selling newspapers, like the Courier Post, on, you know, like doing just like random calls, and also literally being a paper boy, because back in those days, if you had routes that included the Sunday paper, the Sunday paper usually paid pretty good because it was double to triple the size of a daily paper, right?
Mhm.
So what I would do is I would go with him. I'm like 12, 13 years old. And especially on the weekend routes and on the Sundays. And we would go and, deliver the Sunday papers. Because also, this was also back in the day when some people, they didn't have get newspapers every day. They would just get the Sunday, because the Sunday is the one that came with the coupons and like the special editions and all that. So we would do that, and then we would go to McDonald's and get because this was like a big deal, right? Getting a McDonald's breakfast. Remember the ones with the pancakes and the sausage and all that? Like that was like a big treat. Okay. So I found out, and I don't remember how, that you could get the Camden County, New Jersey, if you could prove financial need, you could actually get a job at the age of like 13, as long as your parents approved it, 12, 13 years old. So I'm like, I want my own paper route, right? So my father gives in, and I still remember when he signed off on, me having a paper route, because he could easily prove that, we needed it. And so we're going out, and I got to tell you, delivering that Sunday paper was exhausting. I mean, that was back-breaking, because what they would do is you would have to go, and there was like a central location where you went, and you were the ones, the paper boy and paper girls, they're the ones who actually packed it. That didn't come pre-packed. It came in a stack. And that stack you then had to take and put it all together, right? And then you would go around to whatever routes you had, right, and deliver it. So admittedly, there came a point when I was like, I am so tired. This is back-breaking work, but I promised I would do this, so I'm doing this. Well, one day, I think it must have been like some random morning, I go and I answer the door, and it's the woman who owns that region, right? So she's our manager, basically. And she looks furious. And she's like, you go get your father. And I was like, oh my God, right? So go bring my dad. And all I remember, she is ranting about how dare I steal all the money from the paper route. So it turns out she had gone on vacation, and someone had gone around and collected all the money that was due from all the people. And she was like, you're going to jail. I'm 13 years old. You're going to jail. How dare you do this? Freaking out. And my dad and I are both like, just kind of like, and all I'm like, I don't know what to do, because how do you prove a negative, right? Like, I didn't do it. I had nothing to do with it. I had she's just freaking out. She's going to the police, and this is a federal crime, and I don't know. I have no idea. I don't know any of this. I'm just like, yay, McDonald's breakfast, woo! Like, I don't know anything. So I'm terrified. I mean, for weeks and weeks and weeks, I am absolutely terrified that any minute the cops are going to show up. Now, understand too, I grew up in Camden, New Jersey, which at the time was one of the most dangerous cities in America. So it wasn't unusual to see cops show up at someone's door. Let's just put it that way, right? At my house, yes. But I mean, other people's houses, no. And, sirens were not an unusual sound, all that kind of thing, right? So I'm just like, every night when I go to bed, I am just like lying there like, oh my God, they're going to like barricade, like, what was it? Not barricade, when they have the battering ram our door open and drag me away for stealing. I don't even know, all this money, right? So a couple months pass, and I just thought, well, I don't, they're going to show up at some point. I just don't know when. And she shows up, and I thought, okay. And she's like, go get your father. And this time she's much more, like polite, So I'm like, okay, well, it turns out what she did is she took a picture of me and a picture of my father, because she was trying to collect proof that we were the ones who stole this money, right? So, and she went door to door to every single person on the route and was like, is this the person who came and took the money? And they were like, no, that's Lisa. We love her. Like, she's our paper girl. That she didn't take any, like, what are you talking about? So at that, she's like, okay. So then she took pictures so it turned out while she had gone on vacation for 2 weeks, she put her niece in charge of the routes. Her niece went around with her boyfriend, and they're the ones who stole the money, and they skipped town before this woman came back into town. So she came to us to apologize, but also because my paper routes all said, well, she was the best paper. We wondered what happened to her. She was like the best paper person we'd ever had. And she got this feedback consistently from like everyone on the route, and was like, so, my niece skipped town, and, her and her boyfriend left, all this stuff. So you take the routes back? And I went, no. Because all I kept thinking is, anytime you have an issue, it's somehow this is going to become, it's your goddamn fault, you little demon child. How dare you? So, and I mean, I didn't say it that way. Like, I didn't say like, oh my God, psycho freak. Like, I'm not going to do that. But I just said, no, thank you. I greatly appreciate the thought, but I'd rather not. And then I waited like any normal child until I was like actually legally able to have a job, which actually wasn't all that much longer. I think it was like 14. You could have a job, something like that. So I was like, no, I'm good. I'll wait until I don't have to get sign off from my parents. So that was the first job I ever had.
Did you ever worked again?
And I never worked for them again. My father, on the other hand, because he had that radio personality voice, he said the best paying gig he ever had was doing cold calls, because since he was working the overnight shift at the radio station, at these, like regional radio stations, and he's calling around, these people hear him. He's like, hi, I'm here from the Courier Post, and we'd love to know, like a Sunday paper. And they're like, ooh, he sounds sexy. He sounds so familiar. And every once in a while, someone they'd go, wait, you're Frank Carter. Because this was also back in the day when Kastner was too ethnic a name. Mm-hmm. So he went by Frank Carter. And they were like, oh, are you Frank Carter? And he was like, why, yes, I am. So, which of course, as a kid, I'm sitting there going, oh, dear God, right? Like, seriously? But he said the bonus that you got from the Courier Post on selling newspapers, it was the best paying job he ever had. So anyway, so no, I never went back to him, but he did.
Oh, I love that little story. And it reminds me of one real quickly that's very similar toward the end there. When I was still a teen, telemarketing was a big thing. I mean, every time you went near your phone, a telemarketer was calling. And so I went and got a job. Again, I was still a teen, but I got a job at an office that was telemarketers. And so, there was 50 tables. Each one had the old-fashioned telephone that you would, pick up. And we all had these big, thick telephone books in front of us. And our job was to just randomly go down the list in these businesses. And we were trying to sell advertising space on placemats that would be placed in
like
restaurants.
Or,
Yeah.
yeah.
And So, I didn't care. I was a teenager. It was my job. So that's what I did.
Yeah.
And I was, and some would argue I still am, a naturally lazy person. So one day I wake up and I stretch and I yawn and I say, I don't feel like going to work today. That's all it
Mm,
takes, and I'm off that day, you know.
mm,
So I'm lounging around the house, being lazy, flip on the boob tube, all three channels back then. It was cool. All you had to do was turn the knob. And it's about noon, so here comes the noon news report. And the
mm.
troubleshooter comes on. And he and a group of people and a couple of cops are raiding an office. And everybody's going to jail. It was my office where I was supposed to be that day.
Oops.
And, for the next 5 years, I used that as justification for screwing off work.
Nah. Well, why did y'all get arrested? What was up with that?
It was entirely a scam. There was no placemat. There was no restaurants. They would send out members of their group to go door to. When you did sell something on the telephone, someone
Mm,
from their group would go and collect all the money from the person. And they never saw the money. They never saw the plate. They never saw anything. It was just a big scam, you know. and
wow.
But the important thing, the thing we should all take away from this is, yes, there is justification for being lazy.
Okay.
I thought of it because of your reference to the telephone job,
Oh yeah. Well, Caroline says, first jobs. Are there any people who had great jobs as a teenager? Great if they did. And who would think that about you, Rod, being all lazy? And Caroline also says, all right, Ben, what happened to you? You gotta have a good story in there, young man.
Yeah. You missed my broom story.
No, you didn't do any. You didn't have anything like funky happen when you were coming up.
No.
How about when you were in college and you took that part-time job in the brothel and you were like the cowboy? Remember that? Now you ought to tell us
We had
about
to
that
eat.
story.
We had to eat. But there's only so much tobacco you can process and hay you can haul and brooms you can make.
There
And
you
I
go.
did work in a kitchen at a summer camp for a weekend.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, that was a weekend.
it
But
sounds like it. The way you're
yeah,
giggling.
I wanted to play softball that summer, so I didn't stay in the kitchen because they were gonna have me working when I should have been back up in town playing softball.
Okay.
So
Cool.
I said, I don't think this is gonna work out.
All right. Well, I know since I completely derailed the intent of this entire thing by asking about our first first ones. I know, Rod, you had a topic that you thought about us covering. So why don't you bring that up and be the first to answer it?
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with the very condensed version, I hope, because, I don't want to take up all the time.
Mm,
But it came up over this past week, sort of, Rod, why do you approach stories like a reader instead of approaching them like a real editor? And so, I'll try to answer that a lot quicker than what I initially thought I would. Um, you go reading through a story and you come to a scene that just doesn't fit. It doesn't
mhm,
belong there. And, and I do that as a reader. I come to that scene and I suggest to the writer, perhaps you should consider cutting this scene out. And I got a little pushback on it that, if you were a real editor and you read it like a real editor, you would read the whole story and,
mhm,
you would see that in Act 3, what I wrote there makes this scene make complete sense. And I thought about it and I'm like, well, okay, let's say went at it like a real editor and I read the entire story all the way through and I knew the story really well. And I go back and I start doing my editing suggestions. And when I come to that scene, I might maybe let that scene slide because I know 90 pages later you explained it. That's okay. Okay. Well, if I
mhm,
did that, I'd be making a tragic mistake. And this is why. We sell our books not to editors, but to readers. And unlike an editor, our reader don't know the whole story. And when they get to that passage that rips them out of the story and doesn't make any sense. I mean, let's say you're reading Pet Sematary and you turn the page and all of a sudden you're in The Old Man in the Sea. And it goes on, page after page, and it doesn't belong there at all. What's going to happen is your reader, who doesn't know anything about 90 pages later, your reader is going to be like, hey, wait a minute, where's Lewis and Gage? I didn't shell out $25 to read about this old guy and his fish. Clunk. You just got DNF'd, and the reader's never going to see that 90 pages later. So that's why I really do. When I'm editing, I read the story. I don't read ahead. I read as I go, each part, and I absorb the story as a reader would. And I catch things like that, and I'm as innocent as your average reader. I have no idea what's going to happen later. But I know that this right now, if it isn't fixed, is going to make me put the book down. And that's when I make a suggestion to the writer. So that's why I approach it as a reader more so than as an editor when I'm exploring a story. My time to be the editor is when I go back and make suggestions to the writer about what I found. And then, of course, it's up to the writer what they want to do with it. Does all of that make any sense to you guys, or what are your thoughts?
Oh, it makes absolute sense. Because if the reader hits a point where they can put the book down, that's the last thing you want. Because not only are they not going to read that book, they're not going to read anything else you write. They're not going to become a fan, and because of how you treated them in that first experience. So to iron those out is crucial. You got to do those, and you got to have the discussion. If it's 90 pages, that's one thing, or if it's a couple of paragraphs later, that's one thing. But 90 pages to wait and just, what happened? What was that about? And readers pick up on it. They know subconsciously or consciously that something's missing. There's a hanging storyline out there that I hope you tie it in quick, because now that's all I can think about.
No, I agree. I mean, I think there are ways to, Rod, to your point, you can have a story that it's actually like it's weaving in multiple storylines, but the key word there is keywords there are it's weaving in, right? Because you can have it from multiple points of view. You can have it from, and obviously I'm making this up, the killer's point of view, the victim's point of view, the cousin who seems like they got nothing to do with nothing, right? But there are ways that you do it that it makes it clear to the reader. There's a reason the cousin who seems like he's got nothing to do with nothing is in this story, right? And although I don't understand why right now, that's okay, because you are giving me something as the writer that makes this seem like, okay, I know there's a reason this is here, right? Versus I'm reading this does not make any sense whatsoever. I have no idea why I'm here, and it's jarring, right? And it was funny when you were describing, like, editing like an editor or editing like a reader. When I'm editing a work, I'll typically meet with the author first, just to let them know, or I'll send them an email like, this is how I edit. I'll go through the whole thing, but I'm doing that just because I want to knock it out, right? And then and anyone who's worked with me as an author knows this. If I call you and I'm like, hey, maybe we should talk, and I haven't gone through the whole thing, there's probably things that are thematically need to be addressed, and either I don't understand it, and like you have a reason for it, and I don't understand it, and that's all good, and we need to talk about it, but it also means it's not working. And I want to sit down and I want to talk to the author about, like, hey, I need to understand what we're doing here. I need to understand what your intent is for the story, because I want to make sure that you're successful in whatever that intent is, And I want to make sure, to Ben's point, these authors are going to come away as raving fans, right? These readers rather are going to come away as raving fans. And right now you're not going to get that, right? So let's talk about how we get there. And, you know, it's critical to, if you don't have an editor who does read like a reader, it's critical, in my opinion, to have someone in your life that you feel as though you can pass your work by, and who will give you that honest, you know, reader's view. But I also think from an editor's perspective, it's critical that you read it as if you're a reader, but that you have the knowledge and the experience and the passion for reading and craft, that when you read it as a reader, you go, oh, this doesn't work. And either I know what the author's trying to do, and or I know how to fix it, right? And then you can go back, and when you talk to the author, you can have that conversation where instead of it's just, hey, this isn't working and I don't know why, other than we're starting off in misery and all of a sudden it's Old Man in the Sea and we're back in misery again, and that none of this connects, right? You can have the, hey, you've got this storyline going on, then this storyline, and I don't understand how they work together. Can you explain to me what we're trying to do? And you can take your knowledge and your experience and apply that, so that if they're trying to write Old Man in the Sea meets misery, you make sure that it's successful. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I've found in most cases that that's come up. It's usually either a flashback or a whole lot of description that is identified as the material that's sort of taken the reader out of the story. You know, like you said, if you're reading Misery, imagine for a moment you're reading Christine. 15 pages of card description would be freaking awesome in Christine. It wouldn't make a lick of sense in Misery. You know, so you almost have to ask the author, what's up with the 15 pages of card description? You know, I never recommend an author throw away anything or delete anything, but perhaps this card description should be copied and pasted to another file. It may be great in another story, but it don't belong right here, you know? And so most of the time it's either that or it's a very long and seemingly completely unrelated flashback that by the time you get through that flashback, you don't remember where you were in the story. And that's what I identify as the thing that pulls you out of the story, you know, that it really just isn't serving any apparent purpose. And if it's bad enough or long enough, I've done it myself. I've got a general rule. I do a lot of book reviews, and I've got a general rule for myself that the first 10 pages are about the crappiest stuff I've ever read. I force myself to read 25%. I want to give the author a fair shake because I know how hard it is to write a book. And I figure if I read the first 25%, that's 60, 70, 80 pages. Maybe I get right over this hump that I feel like I'm in. If not, I DNF the book and put it down. I don't know what's beyond that, and I don't care. You know. So if I do it myself as a reader, I have to try to watch out for my authors that their readers may do that if we don't fix this. You know, and I hope that makes sense because that's my primary goal is helping the author produce the very best story where you're glued to the pages all the way through. You don't get bored, you don't get pulled out, you don't get annoyed. You just freaking love the story, and there's no section in it that's bad. That's what I set as the target in every edit that I do. You know,
Yeah.
and so anyway, I approach the story as a reader. I work on it as an editor, and well, I hope I'm really helping people because that's the whole point of doing this, you know.
Totally. Venkat says, hi guys, sorry for being late. I was buying and carrying groceries. All good, young man. Caroline says, weaving it in. I was thinking the same thing, Lisa. Venkat has a new question. So let's say you just got a book idea how would you plan out the whole process? Let's start with Ben.
Because this is the place to start. Because I wouldn't necessarily have a process. I've started books with a line. I've started books with an idea, and then start writing to get to that idea and capture that scene, and then work around it. But it's a lot of times the characters will take over, and it's their story, and they'll let me know. And the way that I had it planned, visualized of ending, usually doesn't work because the characters change it. They say, "No, you're not going to do that. We're gonna do this, and you can't kill me off."
Screw you, man.
Hang around, and they play an important part, and they add value in different ways than I even thought. But the initial book idea comes from a situation, or well, it's like in Triggerfish 1-2. That book started as an idea of a soldier in Vietnam patrolling Woodstock, and what would that be like? And so and then I gave him a head injury and made it happen. But the original idea was just that. What would that infantry soldier do at Woodstock, New York, during a big musical picnic, and everything that was happening there? But so, and then the rest just fell in place. What else could you have him do? Well, you got this interesting character who's in that situation. Where's he going to go from there?
Mm-hmm. How about you, Rod?
All I've got is Rod Gilly silliness. You know that. But I very often, it's been said for a long time, I'll get up out of my office and walk to the coffee pot, and I'll get an idea for a story. It can come that easily. Boing, there it is. And when I get a new idea for a story, now this will be, I'm not even trying to make this good, but I'm trying to demonstrate a pantser's way of doing it. If you would, Ben, give me a guy's name, and Lisa, name an animal.
Oh man, on the spot with a name. How come I don't get the animal?
Okay, vice versa.
See, it's tougher.
Huh?
Let's go with Joe Carter.
Joe.
Joker?
All right.
Joe
Cheetah.
Carter. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go with Joe. And Lisa, name any animal.
Cheetah.
Cheetah. That's a good one. All right, so I'm walking to my coffee pot, and those two things pop in my mind. I come back to my office, sit down at my desk, pull up my word processor, start typing. Boy, Joe was so glad that he had climbed up the tree. He's up there at the top, and he's throwing these coconuts down at that rampant cheetah that chased him. And cheetahs are very fast. If he hadn't had a big head start, why, he would be meat, he would be dinner, he would be gone. He was so thankful he made it up the tree. But now Joe's trying to figure out, how do I get out of this tree and get past that cheetah? Well, there you go. I mean, it just takes off, and all I'm doing is typing and trying to follow it. The story could just go on and on and on and run and run and run. And I'm just typing as quick as I can. Now, of course, there'll be some gibberish in there that needs to be cut out in the rewrite and editing. But that is exactly how I take a new idea and put it to page. That's how it happens.
Okay. I just do whatever. Lately, it's typically on a bet. Like someone will, I'll be talking about something to somebody, and they'll basically dare me to do it, and I'm like, okay, and then that the next thing you know, so like I have an occult detective story that's in the Cure world, with a whole new occult detective heroine that you guys will all be introduced to shortly, because the magazine, it's Weird Tales magazine, and the magazine's going to come out, I want to say, in the next couple of weeks. So, and I got the thumbs up that I can talk about this now, so now I'm talking about it. And that came about because the editor for the acquisitions editor for Weird Tales, Jonathan Mayberry, and I are really good friends. We've known each other over 20 years. And he had read Cure because he had agreed to be an editor for it. Or not an editor, I'm sorry, to write a review of it. And I kept telling him, as long as you don't think it sucks, then fine, right? But if you think it sucks, don't be nice and write a review just to be nice. So anyway, he was in the middle of getting folks to write for the occult detective occult detective edition of Weird Tales. And he said, if you could have an occult detective in the Cure world, what would you do? And so I described it. I was like, I would have this and she would do this, and I would write it from this perspective. And I'm not going to give away because there's a huge twist to the first short story in this occult detective series. And this is what would go down. And he went, I love it. Write it up, email it to me, copy your agent, and and we'll take it from there. And I went, really? And he was like, yep. And I know better than to question anything more than once. So I said, okay, you got it. So I went home, I wrote it up, and I could already, because it was already in a world that I'm going to argue Ben and I created, it wasn't that hard to envision what was going to happen. Shot it off, and I want to say in like 48 hours, he came back and went, yep, great. You only have 5,000 words. You can't do anything more than that. And Ben, being my troubleshooter, knows that I had a really hard time keeping this baby at 5,000 words because I feel like it more naturally would have been a bit more, you'd get a lot more twists and a little more layers to it if I had at least 7,500 words. But again, I know when to push and when not to push. But that was the last one. That's how that actually came about. But and for our next book in the series of Cure's World, I'm just going to go back and reread Cure and Family Pack and the upcoming anthology of short stories that are in the world of Cure. And because I typically leave a lot of little like hints and hangers throughout the story that we just don't pursue, but you just think, oh, well, that's interesting. So I'm just going to pick up a bunch of them and use those as the main storylines for the next one, which is all we did for Family Pack. I mean, to be honest, but yeah, so. And Ben sitting here laughing, going, "Oh yeah, that's true."
That's exactly what we did.
Exactly what we did.
It was exactly what needed to be done, though, or could be done.
Yeah. And we actually both. I intentionally. I read a lot of history and a lot of mythology. And what'll end up happening is when I'm plotting, if I'm plotting a longer piece, Ben and I'll say, hey, what about this, and this? And, Ben is actually also really big on research. So, we might come up with like this kind of mythological or historical vampire, because once upon a time, people truly believed in vampires. Like things like that. And like, well, how can we use this? Because this might be kind of cool if we do this as a subplot, and then we play with it from there. But typically nowadays it starts with a dare. So
which reminds me though, we need to work in a grave with wrought iron over the top to keep the vampires in.
Oh yeah.
We got to work that in there.
Mm-hmm. Well, we need to pursue, because we left in hints on a whole race of vampires in Family Pack that we didn't actually have in Cure. Yeah. And by the way, Family Pack comes out in October of this year, people. So if you're watching and you're like, what are they talking about? Pick it up, because then we leave a bunch of hangers in Family Pack too. Yeah, there's a whole, and it's based in mythology. But yeah, we kind of start weaving that in so that we can then pick it up in the whatever the next we're going to name the next book. And since we haven't actually plotted the next book out yet, I have no idea.
I'm thinking Runt of the Litter.
But then that implies it has to have, like, the Hobbit.
It's an idea. We can throw that idea out.
We could do the Hobbit. It's fine. That's fine. We can somehow figure that out.
A vampire hobbit.
A vampire? Why not?
Yeah.
So okay. I'm sorry. I'm looking at the comments again. So Caroline says weaving in the description with action is art. Absolutely. And Venkat says, so what softwares do you use to write? And is there any software to track characters in a story? I'm going to hit up Rod first because he's giggling.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, let's get me out of the way. I'm not nearly as interesting. I'm kind of boring, I'll be honest with you. Every story that I write, working on a couple of novels, novella, bunch of short stories, and all of the above, I start out, I write on Word. I really like Word. It's simple. I sit down and go, like I said, I get inspired and just start going crazy. I'm not going to name some of the other software. I don't want to put anything down, but I don't have to figure out how it works. I don't have to work my way through 50 different levels of process or information. I sit down at Word, I got a nice blank screen. I go to work. I love it. And as far as tracking characters, I guess it would depend. If it's a pretty simple story, I've got 2 characters. That's not hard to keep track of. If it's a Stephen King style story with 50 characters, I think you almost would have to have a little file that at least gives you the basics of each character off to the side. So, you can remember this one likes apples and that one likes bananas. If you got a whole lot of characters, if it's a very complex story, at least a simple file with each character named and a few of their character traits, I would think would be a really good idea. But I don't think you need real complicated software or expensive software to write a best-selling book. I think you can do it on Word as easily as they used to do it on a typewriter and by hand.
Okay. How about you, Ben?
Yeah, it's not a novel, but let's see, it's like journals like this. Mm-hmm. Each one of those folded pages is its own poem, and I've got one here to my left and one downstairs. One collection called Petty Days, and another collection that is being typed up called I Have a Theory.
Okay.
But when it comes to tracking characters in a novel, I think it depends on you can do it with character development, because once you develop that character with the characteristics you want them to have and with the idea of what role they're going to play, it's much easier to keep track and don't let them get away from you. Don't let them just come into a scene and be really important in that scene, and then, hey, what happened to that guy? And disappear. So, and it comes down to making sure that the characters that you do develop add value, because some characters don't need to add value. They're the cashier at the 7-Eleven, and they're going to be in one brief exchange that helps develop the main character, because they're bouncing off ideas of this not so main character. But I think with character development, and you get it written down, whether it's actual as you go through, or like Rod says, if it's notes off to the side, you keep those ideas about that character. What would that character be like? What would they do? And to just keep track of them that way. And the shorter time period that you use to write a novel helps keep track of characters as well, because once you leave it for 6 months and come back, you've really got to reread the whole thing. Which I've heard that you've been told to write the novel you want to read. that you want to see out in the world. And the main reason for that is because when you get it done, you're going to have to read it another 75 times to get it right. And so write the one you want to read because you're going to have to.
No, yeah, all great points. I use OneNote, Word, Google Docs, Excel, believe it or not. OneNote, it's because, like I mentioned, I'm a research hound. So I keep a page in OneNote or a section in OneNote per book that has all the links to all the different most important research pages that I had found. And then any like copy and paste of any like key information that I found to be critical for whatever it was that I was doing within that work. And I brainstorm out usually my first version of the narrative, usually either in OneNote or Google Docs. If I'm traveling, it's probably going to be in Google Docs because it's easier to access from any laptop. I don't have to be on my own laptop. And then, I already referenced that I tend to write characters that are secondary characters in one book, and then in the next book they're going to be primary, which is interesting because I've had several requests for Cure that some of the secondary characters, we actually explain what the hell, like why, more about them. Like people found them interesting. And I was like, oh, good. Then you're going to like Family Pack because Family Pack, we do exactly what you want. And then it's like, no, stop. Don't tell me anything else. Let me read it. But so that I remember, because, usually it's about 2 years between books, so that I remember who we were targeting as being going from a secondary character to a primary and why. I keep whole sections about that character and their backstory and how they're related to other characters and how they got to why they got to be who they are. And, I'll have whole notes on that because we tend to interweave a lot of our characters so that, ones that you think they don't know each other, in reality, you'll find out they have a very long history together, as do others within the story. And so I have to have that. Like I have to have that detail. And sometimes I'll use Excel because it's easier for me to track if it's a historic timeline. It's easier for me to keep track of that. Like, this is the 1920s, this is the 1930s, this is the whatever, and here are the things that are primary or significant within that that I need to keep pertinent. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I tried to use some of the, writer's tools, and I just thought, honestly, paper, pen, pencil, and Word, when you get right down to it, those are, my core tools, just as both Rod and Ben had mentioned. So, and then the next
right, it's got to be right for each individual.
Sure. Exactly. I mean, I forget what the software is, but there's a software tool that it breaks it out by chapter, and the way that it lines up, it allows you to see like chapter to chapter. And that, I mean, if you find that helpful, go for it. Right? I mean, to Ben's point, you've got to go with whatever it is that's going to make you feel comfortable. So, and I've got no answer for this one. So Venkat says, so what's the weirdest dream you ever had? And since Ben's already giggling, that man's going first. I'm sure you two next time are going to be like, I refuse to laugh at anything. Because Lisa's going to pick on me.
I personally like dreams that are stories, and they come across that like I'm watching a movie, and there's times when I'll wake up and I'll go back into the same scene, the same dream, and it's really kind of rewarding, especially from a writer's point of view, because oh, you said this would make a great story. This would make a great novel. But then, of course, in the morning you wake up and say, I can't make that work. How did that work in Dreamland? It's not how it's going to work on pen and paper land. But
That's awesome.
the one that came to mind when I saw the question was a dream about house drug. And you take house drug, and instead of individuals indulging in drugs at a party, you sprinkle house drug around the area where the party's going to be. And so I've got it being sprinkled in the backyard, but there's two criminals that running from the police on the outside of the fence, and they're about to jump into the house party without knowing what's going on. And so it's been a story in the wetware for a long time, but it came from a dream.
Got it.
No, why I was dreaming of house drug, I have no idea.
All right, Rod, you've been giggling this whole time. You've got to give it up.
Oh, I just find you guys so funny and enjoyable. That's all. I don't know. I guess I got two little examples real quick. I had a dream a long time ago, similar to what Ben said. It was so fascinating, and I think I was a teenager or maybe in my 20s. So we'll kind of leave the topic of the dream off to the side. But
Okay.
it was so funny that for like 3 weeks, every night I had the same dream, and every single night that dream picked up where the night before had left off. It was a
That's cool.
continuation, like watching a mini series. And it just went on and on and on. And it was so wild. I was like eager to get back to bed and see where the story went, And so, hoping there are no psychologists in the audience, I don't want anybody chasing me around with a net. But, 30 years later plus, as an old man, the worst weird dreams are you having a dream that you're running around. You're trying so hard to find an unoccupied bathroom, a portalet, a decent sized tree, something. You've really got to go to the restroom, and you're trying to find a place, and you think you found a place, and a little girl walks by. Oh God, I can't go there. Then you go running looking for a place to go pee. And when you wake up, you make a beeline for the bathroom because you really got to go to the bathroom. You ever have a dream like that where you're dreaming about something and when you wake up, it's real and you got to go do it. I've had a number of various dreams where when I woke up, it was actually a very real thing. The dream was trying to tell me something, I think. Have you ever experienced that, or are the nuts coming?
No, I mean, honestly, most of my dreams, I either I don't remember them, or when I remember them, I tend to, like, if I'm having a dream and it's really freaky, my brain immediately starts free associating. Okay, what is this referencing that has either occurred in the last 24 hours or that I am trying to solve that has occurred in the last, however much time. And then because my conscious mind is basically taking over where the subconscious is trying to pull things together, I gain control of the story or of the dream, and because I'm so conscious of what's going on, and then I go back to sleep because I solved my own question. I answered my own question, or because even when it starts, I know why, right? Like I'm like, oh, this is because I watched Get Out, and this happened in the movie, and so now, okay, yep, got it, okay, or. But I think everybody, Rod, at some point wakes up in the middle of the night having to pee, and it came up in the dream, and I think that's pretty normal. So, and with that, we have 1 minute left. So, real fast, Caroline asks, do any of you dream the answer when you are writing and get stuck? I free associate the answer sometimes. Like I'll just allow myself to write, and it'll come forward. Or I wouldn't say it's like I get stuck. It's more like I'm not happy with where it's going. I think it's boring or whatever. And then I'll when I wake up, I have the answer. I don't, it's not that I necessarily dream it, but I'm like, because it allows your subconscious mind to kind of pull things together. But how about Ben, Rod? What about you guys?
Well, I think of my dreams as an extension of my imagination. So I will often pluck ideas out of my dreams. It's just no different than using my imagination in my conscious time. I like it. It's where the creativity can flow from. So, I'll pick a solution for a problem out of just about anywhere because there's always a solution. You just got to find the one that fits. And oftentimes it'll come out of a dream. Mhm.
How about you, Ben?
I just think that the whole getting stuck is a indicator of not being satisfied with how it got there. Kind of like what Lisa's saying of you're not happy with it, so that makes you stop and evaluate what you're not happy about, and that's getting stuck. Of course, that's just another way to put it. But to look at, well, what do I have to change? What do I have to go back and change to where I don't hit this? It's like trying to get out of a maze and you keep running into a wall. You've got to find the right path. And so you got to back up sometimes to find the right path and massage it into the way to go.
And on that note, I am going to say thank you guys, because I know we're over. As always, fantastic questions. Thank you, Ben Cut. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, TJ. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Ben and Rod. And we will see you guys next time. Until then.